All right, thank you for staying with us on Daybreak. Let me just reintroduce my panelists this morning before we get into Katiba at 15. I'll start with you, Ruth. Ruth Bolo, who is the board chair of Young Women Leaders Connect. We also have sitting next to her, Boniface Nyamu, who is an advocate. We have sitting next to him, Janet Watoro, who is a program associate for the Institute of Social Accountability, we have sitting behind her, Dennis Kusgei, who is an IT systems expert and is also speaking for the diaspora community in this conversation. And sitting next to him, we have Advice Mondalo, who is a leadership and communication specialist. And sitting next to him, we have an economist by the name of Nyabul Okinyo. I promised you 2 minutes advice on the issue of SHA and accountability.
Yeah, thank you, Olive. I think the first thing I wanted to say is there was a conversation about the problem at the ministry and Aden Duale being related to him being a teacher. And I just wanted to clarify that there is no problem with anyone being a teacher. Actually, this country has been led by a teacher for 24 years, at a time when Africa was experiencing coups and counter-coups, and we survived as a country, regardless of the issues that he may have at the time, but centering and narrowing the conversation to make it look as though being a teacher is part of the reason why we have a problem. I think that was unnecessary. And then I also just wanted to say that most of the time, we have conversations around issues such as SHA, which is a government program. We must not be able to discuss it using our political inclination, because that is usually where the problem is. Most of us start having this conversation, but the first thing we have asked ourselves is, which side of the political divide am I? So for as long as your political divide is one term or whatever it's called, then you tend to think that all your arguments must be able to be in a manner that aligns to the dictates of your party leader, maybe who has come from abroad or something. So we must be able to understand that when we're discussing issues that are fundamental like SHA, we must point out the issues for what they are. And we must also be able to point out the progress for what it is. Okay. And that is exactly what I did. I told you that there was, when Aden Duale came into the ministry, the truth is that there was a bit of stability at the time. Even when he was being hosted on the media houses, we're able to see even the comments from the people that I actually went to this hospital and got this treatment. Remember, we live in a country where the media is all over this country. And if really the problem was as enormous as sometimes want to make it look, every news item today would be having queues and queues of people telling us about how they haven't received the treatment. Remember, at some point, that was the case. At some point, even patients were able to storm Afya House. So we must be able to understand that the reality is that there is something that has been done, but there is something that needs to be done. For instance, the claims. When now you talk about those hospitals that look like tents, and you're telling us millions have been paid, now that becomes a problem.
All right.
When we're talking about such kind of issues, that when you're talking about a 10.6 billion misappropriation, of course, I've seen them saying they have been able, it's not been done. But now that becomes the problem. The issue should not be that every time we get to conversations about real issues and real government projects, we reduce them to our political inclination and also reduce them to personalities and professions.
Nyabul, your right of reply?
Yeah, I think I can't allow a misrepresentation goes uninterrupted, okay? My friend Advice has a tendency of making everything political and shunning us from being the political in the same sense. Listen, a teacher is as important as a doctor. All I just want is, I don't want a doctor to teach me, and I don't want a teacher to treat me. Thank you.
All right,
CSS
Janet.
Don't teach and treat.
Okay,
CSS execute leadership.
That is a symbolism.
So the problem is,
that is a symbolism.
The problem is that simplistic understanding of thinking that when you are the Minister of Environment, you should be
so that we make time.
That is where we have a problem.
Katiba at 15, all right? So we've looked at the right to health, and we've seen there's a ways to go. And on some issues, realization was intended to be progressive. But Janet, have we realized, in your opinion, the aspirations of the drafters of the Constitution of 2010?
Well, in my opinion, looking at where we are at, the intent was great. Have we realized it fully? Not quite. We're not there yet. On one hand, we have devolution kicked in. Services were meant to be brought closer. We have seen that happening. However, have we fully implemented devolution? Not quite. We have issues of delayed disbursements. We have issues of separation of powers in itself. we are seeing MPs trying to hold on to the CDF, which is unconstitutional. You cannot be doing oversight and yet you still want to manage the same funds that you will be doing oversight over. That is definitely unconstitutional. So yes, we have huge hiccups in the Constitution itself was beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And Article 1 says that it gives power to the people. But then that also has been usurped by the people who are in power, trying to amass all the power which they have been bestowed just as custodians to protect and uphold and respect the Constitution. So we still have a long way to go. And at 15 years, I mean, you already know what is working, what is not working. So I think we need to do more.
Aha. We know what is working, what is not working. You think we know what we need to do. So you will tell us that whether that includes rewriting some things, but we'll come back to that. Dennis, your thoughts. What do you think was the biggest gain of the Constitution of Kenya 2010?
The Bill of Rights. Actually, and I'm part of the few people who think the Kenyan Constitution is overrated. And
you are with me.
And really...
That statement is unconstitutional.
Explain yourself.
The jaw-drum.
Because actually, if you see from the old constitution that we inherited from the British, you know, what are the major things that the new Constitution 2010 brought in? What was concerning most Kenyans was the Bill of Rights. That's basically the most critical thing that I could say. It was the biggest step. And that could be done through an amendment. And then, of course, we created procedures in which we can amend this constitution. And we brought in gender equality to that gender rule, which we are not even implementing. And the implementation of this constitution has been, actually it has taken, I don't know, very long. We need to remember that until the previous government, we still had the DOs and DCs, like 10 years after the promulgation of the new constitution. And every time since independence, and the Kenyan constitution actually, the making of the new constitution started way back in 1991 when we repealed the Section 2A and allowed the country to be a multi-party. That's when now we started thinking, oh, we could have a new constitution. But what's the need of a new constitution? There's a country like America, their constitution is 237 years old. They've been improving it. We needed a new constitution because somebody wanted to score some political mileage. And the future, even what we will be doing in the future, in the few months from now, we will be probably amending the constitution, which I am for. I believe that this document should be made in a way that it should evolve with the environment. And the old constitution, we were fighting about two things in the previous constitution mainly, which even the current president was against, was considering the LGBTQ as the minority and the Kadhi's Court, which actually you cannot remove Kadhi's Court from Kenya because that thing...
Okay, before we get into all of that, just also, let me also get quickly your take, Wakili. Dennis has said the beautiful document that Janet spoke about is overrated.
I think Dennis is totally out of order because I have also had another panelist say that the Constitution was a very beautiful document. I want to say the Constitution was not a very beautiful document. It is still a very beautiful document. It has not become ugly. When people say that we need to amend the Constitution, I do not agree with them because when you tell me we need to amend the Constitution, you must tell me what is the problem with the current Constitution so that we can amend it. Moving very fast, if you ask me, the biggest gain for me in the new Constitution, which was implemented in 2010, is the Bill of Rights and devolution. Why am I saying this? You see, during the other regimes, sometimes if you are not in favor with the government of the day, you used to miss out. But with devolution, you are assured that even if you don't see eye to eye with the government of the day, your county must receive its shareable revenue from the national government. However, having said that, I must say that as far as I'm concerned, we are doing badly as far as implementation is concerned. Because this constitution, it does not mean need so many things. It only needs a government, leaders who are ready to live and to rule by the rule of law. If you look, for example, Article 2 talks about the supremacy of the Constitution. I'm surprised when one of my panelists say that we gave ourselves this Constitution just because of political supremacy. That is not the case. This is a Constitution that was gotten as a result of blood, sweat, and tears. Mind you, the reason as to why he's coming to Citizen TV to freely express himself without having to look over your shoulders of Nice will be here to arrest you is thanks to the drafters of this Constitution and to the people who fought for the second liberation. That is why I'm saying we are the generation that must fight for the third liberation, because the first liberation was the independence. The second one was the 1980s and 1990s.
Multi-party democracy?
Multi-party democracy. The third liberation is now the Gen Z and the millennials. If we fail this nation, we might not be in a position to recover. But I'm very hopeful with this generation, Gen Z and millennials.
So this would be, the third liberation would be in defense of the Constitution? In defense of the Constitution of 2010.
Yes.
All right. Ruth, I'm seeing behind their advice is so amused and entertained by this debate. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with, for example, Kibe Mungai in today's Standard says, how excessive presidency has trampled upon the loved promises made from blood and tears, the blood and tears that Wakili Boniface made reference to, because the whole idea of the Constitution, partly, right, was to devolve power from a superior, all, godlike presidency.
I think it's very easy to wish away and to overlook the gains that we have made 15 years down the line when you look at some of the unlawful things that are happening in this regime, and even towards the end of President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime. So it's very easy to overlook that. But I think I'd like to agree on the Bill of Rights. So I won't really speak on that. But I'll speak on the separation of powers. I mean, for the first time, we had a landmark ruling, not just in Africa, but globally. When Maraga gave his ruling on the election results, that is something that previously would not have happened. So the separation of powers for me is beautiful. Previously, Parliament was not able to oversight. It was not one of its mandates. But now Parliament can oversight. As to whether or not they are doing that effectively, that is a whole different conversation that then has to do with us who put those parliamentarians there. And that's a whole other discussion. I think also the independent commissions that are now there to also check and balance the executive as opposed to how it was previously. As to whether or not those bodies are actually independent, again, that goes back to the implementation bit of it. I would, if I were asked, I would maybe look at one of the areas I would look at is disbursement of funds of these independent constitutions, or sorry, independent commissions should not go through Parliament, because especially right now with a Parliament that seems to be at the grip of the executive, how do you then oversight and check and balance that same an executive that then has control of Parliament, who is then in charge of dispersing your funds? So I think those are some of the areas that still have gaps. But I agree with Wakili that our Constitution is still very beautiful. It's been able to give us, to close some gaps that existed previously. As to devolution still remains a great idea. Again, it goes back to implementation. And for me, the full implementation of this Constitution is two-way. The first is political goodwill, of course, and one of the gaps is that some of the people who need to implement this Constitution, like the parliamentarians and the executive, they are putting their selfish interests first. But again, too, us as citizens, who are actually putting these parliamentarians there, we actually have a role to play, and we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we actually living by the spirit of this Constitution? The Constitution 2010 aimed to foster national unity. But we are seeing each and every time, just looking at the headline you read today, every time one of our politicians is on fire, they automatically run and play the ethnic card. So we are seeing that day by day, these are some of the things that might make us overlook the 2010 Constitution. But I think for me, this Constitution still remains really, really good. There are areas that, of course, we still need to amend as we go. Areas like public participation, which, again, is an awesome idea. And we have seen a lot of rulings or laws that seem to be pushed before going for public participation, again, are being thrown out. So I think public participation for me is beautiful, only that now we actually did not have an act to put a threshold of, to dictate some of the metrics of what a successful public participation would look like. And it's only up until, I think, 2 or 3 years ago that we now started having conversations on what should this public participation act look like. And finally, my biggest problem with the implementation of this constitution is we have a leadership of this country that does not seem to have the slightest regard of the law. I'll give the first example, the two-third gender rule.
Okay, can I press pause on that? We'll come back, okay? We'll come back to that. But the economist in the House, Nyavol, do you agree with Wakili that maybe it's premature to start talking about amending things in the Constitution? Or should we first, fully realize certain aspects of it? Because, for example, there are those who take the view that 47 counties are just too many.
Well, as we embrace and reflect our journey of the Katiba at 15 years, we should be bold enough and seek constitutional amendment. Of course, we have our overrepresentation in the National Assembly. I mean, let's face it, 47 women representatives are useless, baseless, and costly.
Why did you start with women?
I've said 47.
And Ruth is sitting right there in front of
Well, I've said 47.
We have not even reached two-thirds gender.
I'm making my point.
Okay, proceed.
Just like I said, 47 women representatives are useless, baseless, and costly. We have,
according to you?
According to me, of course, it's my opinion. Of course, we have 62 senators. We have 348 members of parliament. In total, it makes them 410 in the National Assembly. We have 47 governors. We have 47 deputy governors, whose primary role is to wait for to get power through backdoor, through impeachment. Otherwise, they have no specific role. And we also have 900 MCS. Cutting this cost by almost for the parliament to 200, and of course scrapping the 47 representatives and the 47 deputy governors, we have the capacity to save almost half of the budget. You see, a common Wanjiku has no capacity to continue bear the cost of the increasing waging bill in the names of salary and remuneration. And this is not an idea about women or whatsoever. I believe that leaders should be elected on the basis, just like I said, on the basis of meritocracy. Putting gender ahead when electing leaders is in the same qualification of putting tribe ahead when electing other leaders.
So you don't believe in affirmative action?
No, I believe in meritocracy and qualification of a leader. I don't believe on gender and I don't believe on tribe. Well, for the 2010 Katiba...
I see Ruth in front of you is about to explode.
I know it's a tricky conversation, but we'll get there. So, for the 2010 Constitution, I envision it like a baby who has outgrown a parent, and he must be given a chance to be independent and get the fair share of the wealth. So, in this case, in an economic angle, okay, we had 4 key aspects that 2010 Constitution championed for: Bill of Rights, devolution, youth and women public participation, and public finance. Just hold on, and public finance. So the devolution aspect was aimed to take pesa mashinani. But you see what it has done? It has simply taken pesa from county exchequer to the governor's account. What it has done, it has simply transferred power from the national government to few local men in the name of MCS. So we need to have these hard conversations, because devolution in the long run was supposed to bring power to the people. I'll quote the Bible, Luke chapter 12, verse 48. It says this: "For whom much is given, much is expected." Kenyan government has mischievous way of finding a way around that verse. Where much is given, much is lost. I agree, much has been given in devolution, but much is lost through corruption. Of course, through runaway corruption, embezzlement of funds, and inflated cost of projects. I will have gone on and on, but it's important we discuss this conversation of constitutional moment. Kenyans are ready for this conversation as long as it's going to save the cost.
All right. And I was not going to interrupt you, by the way. I was just looking at the time. Advice. You look like you're about to give this gentleman a standing ovation.
I'm just realizing I needed to watch this conversation more than be part of it. But I think when we talk about the matters of the Constitution, what I think has been the biggest gain of the 2010 Constitution is that it gave country to the people. Because for a long time since independence, there was more or less a presumption that the country belonged to the leadership and not the people. The 2010 Constitution gives the country back to the people from its opening clause when it talks about the sovereignty belonging to the people. And it's about we, the people. I saw some gentleman who has been largely quoted for that. And this has actually been done in almost every aspect of governance. You see the aspect of public participation. It's now a very primary role. It's something very fundamental today in the country, that we're having conversations around it. There is a conversation of do we need an act around it? It essentially talks about how really today the governance of the country, it is very hard for you to actually fail to involve the people, including even in the leasing of public enterprise. These are not things that were there before. I think that's one of the biggest gains of the Constitution. The other one that I feel is a big gain of the 2010 Constitution is the provision of checks and balances. Because unlike before, today checks and balances of people in public office is up to the highest level. And there has been tests to actually prove that this Constitution can be able to withstand. We have been able to have initiatives that have actually been led by the president, and sometimes when the president and the former prime minister in the BBI, and you would be able to see that flop. Now, initially, there never used to be such cases as fundamental as that an initiative led by the president would actually be declared unconstitutional. And I think that is one of the biggest gains of the Constitution. We have also been able to have issues of impeachment of as high-ranking a person as a deputy president of a country, that has been able to be tested by this Constitution. And on account of the meritocracy of the Constitution and what it upholds as what a public officer should be, we have had that kind of a person and a holder of such an important office getting impeached. We have had governors get impeached in this country. We have had deputy governors get impeached. And I think on the aspect of checks and balances, it has really, really done well in terms of really ensuring that it puts public officials on toes. Of course, there are, and where I agree with my friend is that we have places that we also must have someone the courage to start having conversations over. Because sometimes I also feel like, whereas our Constitution really tries to ensure that people in public office do not overstep, it also makes the assumption that every other person in the Republic means well for the Republic. And now that element of it is misused, and therefore sometimes it derails governance. Because we have had instances where even initiatives that are good from public officials, from government officials or any other person are simply delayed constitutionally for the sake of even sometimes just bargaining and negotiations, where you have something that really makes sense for the country, but you'll just be told the court has stopped it for whatever reason, because we have had these instances where we have selective use of parts of the Constitution. For instance, aspects such as public participation. Sometimes we are using these things very selectively just to make our bargains. And also we must be able to have honest conversations about some of the positions that we have in the country. For every Kenyan today, every Kenyan is represented by about 6 elected people. We have to then try to rationalize and understand what is the impact of this representation of 6 people per person. Is it really being felt by the common mwananchi when he's seated back at home? Because actually, Olive, Kenyans should be some of the safest people in the world, because when you wake up in the morning, you should know that you have an MCA who is thinking about you, you have a member of parliament who is thinking about you, you have a women representative thinking about you, you have a deputy governor thinking about you, you have a governor, you have a president and a deputy president. There are actually about 8. All those people should be thinking about you. So actually, as Kenyans, we should be complaining about nothing because we have so many people thinking about us. So whereas that is a reality, then we must come back and ask ourselves, is this really, really making sense in regard to, is it now transforming to the reality of my life as a person? So the 2010 Constitution, whereas it has its gains, we must also be able to face it and tell ourselves the truth that there are misses that we have also had because of the 2010 Constitution. We have projects that have been delayed just because there is some selective picking of points within the Constitution and just derailing points within the court process. We must be able to look at ourselves in the eye and ask ourselves the way my brother is asking, what has been the gain since we started having some positions?
Okay.
The women representative, for instance, what have been the gains so far since we started? These 47 positions, how have they really impacted? Even as we try to say...
Ruth, I'll give you a chance to respond. I'll give you a chance to respond. Don't worry, Ruth has the answer. All right, let me come back to you, Dennis. Are you now convinced by your fellow panelists, as much as they've highlighted wins and misses, right? And gaps, right? Gaps. Are you now convinced that this constitution is not overrated, or you still maintain your position?
No, really. Maybe I'm missing something, really. But the devolution actually
it's missing a lot.
Yeah, I agree that, and you know, I'm open to learning and understanding. That's the
devolution you're saying.
Yeah, it's not a new thing that came with this constitution. Even the pre-independence constitution actually had the aspect of Majimbo. According to me, a constitution should be some sort of an historical document. It should be a collection of principles that we are willing to follow. It's not just a document. And actually, maybe somebody can prove me wrong in this one. Like, since 2000, when Yashpal Gai started the Constitution of Kenya Review, was running the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, what was driving that initiative? In 2004, the Bomas draft. Just ask yourself, why did we even go to that Bomas draft? What was driving that initiative? If it was not for settling some political issues. And you know, in 2004, I could say we could have had also maybe one of the best constitutions, but Kibaki, who was president then, was opposed to it because he saw that it was going to water down the powers of the president. Kiraitu Murungi, actually, who was the Minister of Justice at then, spoke very openly against the proposal that came from the Bomas of Kenya 2004. But they needed to give something to Kenyans, so they came up with the Wako draft. And Wako draft actually created the ODM that we know today. Ruto, I think Ruto, Kalonzo, maybe Uru was in. I don't remember very well. And at the committee of experts, actually we were solving a very bad incident that happened in 2007, and we wanted to give Kenyans some sort of new lease of breath somehow. So I believe that the constitution that we got during independence, we would have developed it. I gave an example of the American Constitution. It's 206 years old. It has been amended only 27 times. And the biggest amendment that came into that constitution is the Bill of Rights, which I say is the biggest gain in the new constitution. But devolution, actually, depending on how you see it, you see it, all the initial governors that were elected were the people who could make the loudest noises. They were not the most competent. And we ended up, actually, governors thought they were continuing to be politicians, but they were going to manage very important parts of the country. Now we want to go back to the 7 or 8 regions that we had initially. So it's better. New is not always the best.
Okay.
According to me, I believe we should just increasingly, progressively improve on what we have.
All right. So before we get into the question of overrepresentation, because that appears to be a big issue, I have already some sentiments online. We have Babu Michael, who says the problem we have in Kenya, as we reflect on Katiba at 15, is implementing the Katiba selectively. Most regimes so far since the Katiba have only implemented what fits their narrative and ideology, omitting mostly the Bill of Rights. Says Voice of the Youth hasn't had an impact 15 years down the line because they can't stand on their own, depending on political bigwigs and more so financially unstable. Godfrey Barasa says 15 years on, our constitution gathers dust as the political class cherry picks what suits them. Kenya doesn't lack laws, it lacks leaders with the courage and integrity to enforce them. Engineer Lazarus Kanyambok says time is ripe for the 2010 constitution to be subjected to radical changes. Some positions doing duplications of the duties and burdened Kenyans with the wage bill, i.e. CS in the counties and national government. Let's take, this is who, Remy Butia, who says Katiba at 15 embodies our collective hope for equity, devolution, democracy, and the rule of law. As patriots, it is our sacred duty to protect this great document, honor the sacrifice made for its birth. And Babu Michael says it is necessary to amend parts of our constitution after having experience with it for 15 years and knowing its weaknesses. We also need to change our attitude and view it as an important document, but not just a piece of paper. Stop impunity. So, fine, beautiful, glorious document, progressive document, I think is the terminology I've had a lot, Janet. Is it so much the that Kenyans feel there is? Because we've talked about separation of powers, but what I'm hearing mainly is with regard to the judiciary. But some concern has been raised about why do we have all these constitutional commissions? What are they doing? Many times we'll hear, okay, where is NCIC when certain inflammatory remarks are made? There are those who view the ODPP as being now not as independent as a constitution provides. This how, you know, what Kibe Mungai is saying, how excessive presidency has trampled upon the loft promises made from blood and tears. Is it about the constitution or is it about the people who occupy these offices?
Looking at it from my point of view, it's that we have these commissions which are mandated in the constitution to carry out the jobs. If it's EACC, if it's the ODPP, that's their job. Now, the people sitting in these offices upholding what they need. When we look at the ODPP, at times he would throw out cases and say that maybe there's lack of evidence, but these are people that have been allegedly been involved in corruption. So my view on why these commissions and independent institutions may or may not be working is that they need strengthening. Cutting funding to them is a challenge. Infringement by the executive, we have seen time and time again, interfering into their mandate. Again, I will go back to separation of powers. Why would we have 3 arms of government to separate these powers and we have one arm trying to impose itself on the rest? There needs to be leadership that sits in these different arms of government who uphold what the Constitution says. If it is Chapter 6 of the Constitution, leadership and integrity, it's about values. What values are we seeking in the leadership that we as the citizens are choosing? So we need to have people sitting on these positions that will not just recite the Constitution. As you said, it's beautiful, but not just words. It's something that needs to be enacted. We have countlessly said on this show that the problem is implementation. When we start saying we are amending a constitution that we have not fully implemented, then what is our basis for amending those clauses or whatever it is that we are saying we want to amend? So our challenge and our, I would say, call is that we fully implement. Then now we can go back and say, okay, great, we implemented 1, 2, 3 clauses. We are like, no, this maybe is not working. Then we need to amend. But you cannot amend out of the blues and say, this is not working. So full implementation, having leaders that sit there and work towards what the Constitution set out to achieve.
All right. Wakili, this was a product of political compromise, right? So we were told, you know, 80 is good, the 20 will fix hapo mbele. So, I mean, do we give it more time or do we just get down to the business of addressing the 20%?
I want to pick it up from where she left. This constitution, according to me, has no problem. The problem is implementation and interference. And I was part of the team that was saying this constitution is 95% okay, but it has a 5% issue that are not big. So we can pass it, and then we deal with the... Actually, it was 98 to 2%. We were saying we cannot throw away the 98% because of the 2%. Another set of people were saying we cannot take 2% poison because of 98%. We will die. However, what I'm saying, I agree. There are some places in our constitution that need to be looked at. But for me, it is not urgent. For example, I agree when they say the position of a women rep is not very helpful. Yes. Do you know why? You want me to tell you why? Yes. When you elect, when you elect women representatives, you elect them as women representatives. But do you realize when they go to parliament, they're just members of parliament? There is no difference between, for example, Gacheri or Esther Passaris and another member of parliament like, let's say, Moago. Yeah.
But it is about representation, having them at the table. Because how a woman views things is not how a man will view things.
You see, let me tell you something. Which things exactly?
No, Ruth says she'll answer you.
Let me tell you something. The reason as to why these positions for women representatives were put there was actually not to represent women. You must not confuse that. It was just affirmative action. But when you do affirmative, what is affirmative action? It's pulling someone who is down so that they can come to your level. But affirmative action cannot be permanent. It cannot be forever and ever. I am supposed to do affirmative action for a period of time. If I realize now you're not coming up, then I'm not supposed to do other things. Why am I saying this? You see, for me, it beats logic and democracy because we say Kenya is a constitutional democracy and we will get leaders through the ballot. You cannot be telling me, actually, if I was to be asked, the only place I would like to amend in this constitution is that one-third gender rule. Why? Because I agree with the one-third gender rule as far as appointive positions are concerned.
Exactly.
But you cannot say Kenya is a democracy. People are supposed to go to the ballot and elect their leaders. And then you turn back and tell them, while electing those leaders, you must elect one-third as men, two-thirds as women. Let them elect whoever they want to elect. In any event, if it's just elections, do you know women are the majority? Why don't you elect women to be the majority in parliament? So I am not against women. But I would propose we abolish the woman representative's position because it's a member of parliament. If people want to elect, actually, Kenyans have elected women members of parliament. We have people like Wanjiku Muhea. We have people like Millicent, Millie Odhiambo. So it is not something new. However, having said that, I heard you talk about the commissions. Let me tell you something. The problem is not the commissions. The problem is the occupiers of those offices. Why? Because there's too much, even when we call them independent commissions, the executive has refused to let them be independent. A case in point, look at IEBC. IEBC is supposed to be independent. We are supposed to select commissioners. But can I surprise you? I can tell you for free, the current IEBC commission, as was constituted recently. Those ones are appointees of executive sitting somewhere saying, give me the chair, give me the vice chair, give me a member. And it is known. If you trace their history, you will know, although we are saying this is supposed to be independent, they are not. However, we cannot say just because there is interference, we now do away with the commissions. What we are supposed to do is to be firm, ensure there's no interference, because if we say there is a lot of interference with the Judicial Service Commission, so what happens? We say that we abolish it, judges be appointed by the president like used to happen, we will be going back. We say IEBC is supposed to be independent, but it was interfered with by the executive, so we do away with the IEBC. We still need it. However, we need to remain vigilant, because for all the constitutions, the powers that be always have problems implementing those constitutions. But when the citizens are vigilant, it is doable.
All right.
Yes.
Ruth, this is your opportunity now.
Thank you. It's funny that when it comes to all these other laws that are not working, we are talking about amending them. But when it comes to the women rep position that seems not to be working, we are talking about scrapping it off. What? So what metrics are we using to decide what is not working that should be amended and what is not working that should be scrapped off? It's very unfortunate, and I like that he mentioned Millie Odhiambo. I don't know if you're aware that in Millie's county, in Homa Bay County, the gap between the first woman who was elected and Millie is 16 years. So for those 16 years, who was legislating and representing the people of Homa Bay County, the women of Homa Bay County? Who was checking on in terms of a gendered lens, on the budget of the country? Who was doing that within those 16 years? And that it's such reasons that brought about the affirmative action seats. That political terrain as it is very different from men and women. You cannot expect them to compete on a competing ground that is not very fair, that is not very leveled. So until that ground is leveled, there will always be affirmative action seats. And right now, it may be for women, but I am telling you, Olive, in the next 10 years, it is, and we will come, I hope you
You're saying it is the men who will be
Wakili, and I will be telling Wakili, that position needs to be scrapped off. And I'd like to just be very objective and look at some of the laws that have actually been introduced by women, both members of parliament and women representatives. Before I come to the women representative issue, we have the Sexual Offences Act. We've got the Protection Against Domestic Violence. We've got the Victim Protection Act. These are the ones that have been brought about by women, including the women representatives that we are saying should be removed because they are not doing anything. We have the Matrimonial Property Act. I know most of us know that for a very long time, women were not able to inherit property. 1 and 2 women were also not able to get some of the property from that they have helped their spouses to buy. And now you can imagine if Wakili and I are both going to the ballot. I have not inherited property. I have not been, so I cannot even sell property to be able to campaign. He has inherited property. You're telling us to compete. How is that a fair level ground? I think those are some of the societal issues that we need to look at when we are saying that women don't need affirmative action, that women are not able to come up. Right now we're having conversations on the reproductive Rights and Health Bill. That is a document that was brought up by women because they know the issues they face when it comes to, sexual reproductive health rights. All these years, we are yet to have seen even one man contribute and actually say, we have been having issues with my wife when it comes to conceiving a child, and so I think these are some of the legal gaps that are there. But when we remove some of this affirmative action, then we really do not have a voice for some of these minorities, women being one of them. So when we talk about the women representative seat, first of all, I'd like to just give an example for the common Wananchi to understand. If I have 500 shillings and Wakili has 500 shillings, he has 3 children, I have 7. Whose home do you think will feel that 500 shillings more? The one with 7 children or the one with 3 children? It's the one with 3 children. Why I say that is because a member of parliament and a woman representative on paper have the same mandate. But when it comes to the distribution of funds, we're expecting both of them to perform the same. When it comes to the distribution of funds, the women representative receives almost similar for the entire county, and as compared to a member of parliament who is dealing with constituencies, with one constituency. In my county, for example, we have 8 constituencies. Now, that woman rep has the same fund for 8 constituencies, and I can feel advice. I hope he's listening. I can feel him wanting to speak. But in my county, we have 8 constituencies. That woman rep has that fund for 8 constituencies. But my constituency, which is Karachuonyo, that same amount, the member of parliament has just that one constituency. And we are expecting that the women rep will have performed the same. So for me, as we are talking about the women rep seat, because there is a gap, and that is some of the reasons why I think when the constitution was being drafted, in terms of, remember, they didn't even have funds to start with. And so even as they would go and campaign, it had to take some push for them to even be able to be allocated for NGAF. And we kept on telling them, we are not seeing the women rep seat doing anything. So it's one of those seats that was put in the constitution just for us to be able to get our foot in and then now work our way inside the room completely and not just be at the door. Okay. So when we are talking about scrapping it off. I think the conversation should be more of how do we amend it to ensure that it is able to effectively, it's able to be effective and the citizens are able to feel it.
Okay.
If the conversation was about maybe limiting the number of times a woman can go for women, for one person can go for women rep seat, that is different. That is a conversation I'm willing to have. But when we're talking about scrapping it off, then I ask myself, why is it that when it comes to some of these other articles and some of these other laws that are there, we are very willing to change them, and we're very willing to fix the gaps. But when it comes to the women rep seat, then we are not fixing the gap. Okay. We want to scrap it off. Very quickly, when we talk about the county...
Okay, Ruth, let me...
When we talk about the 47 counties being many, I think we would not really feel the pinch if they were working. Just like the women rep seat, we would not feel the pinch if they were working. Look at what Kivutha Kibwana was doing. At that time, everyone used to use Kivutha Kibwana as a case study. We always cite the American Constitution when we want to remove a number of things, including the women rep seat. But I think not everything that the Americans are doing works for us. It's time we had a conversation. We have countries that don't go through the ballot by ticking papers. They use the banos, the marbles, because that is what works for them as a country. So I think we need to have conversations of what works for us as a country,
okay,
and not really always looking at other countries that we should 100% emulate.
All right, Nyabo?
Can I get 1 minute for rejoinder before that point is lost? You see, the reason as to why we strongly feel that the women representative position should be abolished is because, let me ask, for example, come 2027, suppose we go to elections and find that 80% of our parliament is women who have been elected. And I'm not talking about women rep position. I'm talking about these other members of parliament. Suppose we go to parliament in 2027 and we find that 80% of the people who have been elected are women and 20% are men. Then you add the women representative. That would be an unconstitutional parliament. So a constitution should be futuristic. A constitution should be futuristic. Number two, I have heard her talk about the funds. She has been very elaborate about the funds, but that is where we are losing the points. Exactly. The main and the primary role of a member of parliament is to represent, is to legislate, and to oversight. These other roles are secondary roles. They are equally important, but they are secondary roles. So let's not miss the point on the role of members of parliament, because it is...
Advice looks like he's about to jump out of his skin. Okay, point.
Yeah, thank you, Olive. Now, I wanted, and I like that Wakili has actually started from there, because we make a mistake of thinking that elective positions are always about funds. Because, first of all, there was a misrepresentation of facts by Ruth when she says that an MP and a women rep are given the same funds. An MP receives CDF, a women rep receives NGAF. A fund. It's not necessarily the same, but be that as it may, it is not the primary responsibility of an elected member of parliament. A member of parliament's duty is actually representation. And the argument that keeps derailing this country is when we start thinking that leadership is about gender or age or tribe. What this country needs is just sobriety in leadership. And that's why those of us who say that this position is not making a lot of sense for the country is not because there is an onslaught or a war between men and women, but it's about the leadership. The things that Ruth says about, and she mentions that this has been able to be brought to parliament by a woman, now that's where we lose the point. Because then men will also start arguing and saying this was brought to parliament by men, and therefore men are doing a better job than women.
Allow me to just
correct. I was very silent, Ruth, when you spoke. So I want you to exercise emotional intelligence so that you can be able to control yourself.
Hold your horses.
So it is not a competition about which gender is presenting more. It is about which leader is actually doing more of the work. And we can't come to TV and argue about election on the basis of inheritance. If that would be the basis, then the person who needs the affirmative actions the most is the youth. Because the youth, while going to election, has not yet had a work experience. He has not yet been able to receive pension. He has not been able to do all these things. But we don't have a youth representative in parliament. We have not gone somewhere and said, now this position, we are carving it out for the youth because they are marginalized.
Don't we have nominated MPs that represent
It is
the
nominated, exactly. We don't have elected youth rep for the sake of filling the gap. We don't have elected disability rep for the sake of filling the gap. We don't have elected minority just because, why can't we create a position for people who come from Northeastern so that they have a special position where they are elected from? So the issue about the country is not gender. The issue is not age. The issue is not tribe. What the country needs is effectiveness in leadership. And therefore, we cannot be able to say that we create 47 positions in the country just for the sake of gender, whatever that thing is called, gender balance or something. Okay. It is the same argument I would have, Olive, on the question of deputy governors. And I feel that position of deputy governors should also be scrapped off so that the governor can just choose his deputy. We do not need to have wars between governors and deputies, and the governor cannot fire the deputy. And therefore, we have to stay for 5 years and pay a person 1 million shillings for 5 years, and yet the relationship is not working.
All right.
It simply
Ruth,
does not make sense. So it's not just about...
So that's I can give Nyabul opportunity to respond.
And I also feel like in the same aspect of gender, Nyabul needs to speak before Ruth, because for the last 3 hours on this show, Nyabul needs his time to speak, because Ruth has been speaking for the last 2 hours on this show.
I think advice is completely losing it. The minute, and when I was talking about the funds, and I wish he could have brought up the numbers as he was speaking. Yes, there is CDF and GAF, but look at the amount that each and every one of them is given. But that aside,
senators are given nothing.
That aside,
so it's not about funds.
But they will allow you fund as well.
It's not about funds.
Okay,
it's not about funds.
Since last time,
Nyabul needs his time.
We only have 2 minutes to go.
And Nyabul hasn't spoken.
Yes.
I do agree that we need to look at representation legislation and oversight. Why I talked about representation and why I brought up the bills that have been put is even looking at the discussions that we have had in this room. Not one of them has actually stood up for affirmative action. So how would we, if this was Parliament, how would we then trust them to be able to oversight a budget from a gendered lens and be able to say there are certain aspects of health immunization that we need to look at. There are certain aspects of sanitary towels going to schools that we need to look at. There are certain health, when we talk about budgeting, there are certain gendered aspects that we need to look at. If right here, they can't have that conversation, how do they expect us to trust them to represent us? Who will represent those women if those women are not on the table?
Nyabul, no, Ruth, I'm so sorry. Time is up. Nyabul, have the last word. Do you think the biggest problem we have with the implementation of this constitution all comes down to integrity?
The Constitution, Chapter 4, the Bill of Rights, Chapter 4, Article 26, it clearly says the right to life. Article 33 says freedom of expression. Article 34 says freedom of the media. Article 51 says right to custody. Chapter 2, Article 8 says there shall be no state religion. Well, I've picked these 5 articles because I want to demonstrate of how the Constitution, it's more of the custodian rather than the authors or the citizens. Well, right to life, William Ruto has killed youths. Women have lost breadwinners, mothers have lost their children. Freedom of expression, Gen Zs in the streets have been hurt. Freedom of media, the capital CAK has ordered the media stations to be closed. There shall be no state religion. William Ruto is building a church in State House. Well, when it comes to constitution, it's a collective role. But you see, when a president is sworn in, he's given the custodian role to follow the constitution. We as citizens, we have a duty to keep them in check. But at the end, the buck stops with the president, the one who's the custodian. Therefore, integrity, competency is very important of who is holding the office of the constitution, because no matter how many times we amend the constitution and we don't have real change in the leadership, someone you can trust, we cannot have any difference. I can also quote for the police reforms. The 2010 constitution, it removed the 1969 constitution, and it also envisioned a police reform. Well, the only reform that I've witnessed in police, in the police service is the change of the uniform color. Otherwise, same old people. So you see, without synthesizing the beholders of the office with the need to respect this constitution and uphold and hold them accountable, we'll be doing the zero-sum game.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I know we can only cover so much in the amount of time we've had on the subject. It's a conversation that will continue. I'll see if we can pick it up next week as well. Let's take a look at some feedback. Okello Mwalimu, it's sad that despite being the majority, the youth have not fully benefited from Article 55 of the Constitution. Instead, well-connected individuals beyond the youthful age continue to grab opportunities meant for young people without mercy. Do you see anything to smile about? Here we have Sheila Sweden, who says, the youth remain our last line of hope in driving meaningful change, but it's disheartening to see some being swayed away from the cause by personal gain. It's time for a reset. The mission is bigger than any one of us. Recalibrate. This is Bobo Chino. We know who says voice of the youth hasn't had an impact 15 years down the line because they can't stand on their own, depending on political bigwigs and more so financially unstable. Here we have Babu Michael, who says it is necessary to amend parts of our constitution after 15 years of experience and a clearer understanding of its weaknesses. We also need to change our attitude and view it as an important document, not just a piece of paper. Here we have Kiteki Michael, who says Katiba 15 is a good celebration, but is it worth increasing positions as proposed by Raila Odinga through a 3-tier government? If we have to amend the document, it should be to reduce the cost of governance and ensure its full implementation. This is MC Rumaz, who says the Constitution has no problem. The problem is that the same people who oppose the Constitution are now the same people in high office mutilating the Constitution. Otherwise, we have a progressive Katiba. It should be fully implemented. Allow me to thank my panelists this morning. Ruth Bolo, Board Chair, Young Women Leaders Connect. We've had Dennis Kosgei in studio, IT systems expert. Boniface Nyamu, who is an advocate. Nyabulo Kinyo, who is an economist, Advice Mundalo Leadership and Communication Specialist, and Janet Watoro, who is a Program Associate, the Institute for Social Accountability. Good morning.